This video is brought to you by Mubi, a curated streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema from around the globe. Get a whole month free at mubi.com/cinemacartography. To envision the end of the world is to transpose all that you know of reality to its exact opposite. Where there was vitality, there is now death. The hues of life fade into the cold grey absence, and the quest for purpose becomes an unanswerable enigma. For when we are faced with the unflinching comprehension that it will all end, the meaning of life becomes a paradox. Without any future, the present is purposeless, while simultaneously with the end approaching, our instinctive need for reason surfaces. We beg to decipher, what did it all mean? We are all dying, though for now we remain alive. Death, pestilence, and misery remain a part of being human, and the real horrors we all must confront are right at our doorstep. So what exactly do we do about it? What can or should be said that humans betray one another, that people live destitute lives and nothing ever changes? Well, it's here we turn our gaze to the apocalyptic cinema of Bela Tarr. When dissecting a director, we analyse their body of work and the idiosyncratic language they've developed to navigate their medium. In regards to Bela Tarr, the style that's uniquely and utterly his is immediately detectable from one glance at his films.
Hello.
However, finding exactly what Bela Tarr represents as a filmmaker is not as simple as that, and in order to understand the art in its totality, we must begin chronologically. Bela Tarr has made only 9 feature films before retiring from filmmaking altogether, and many divide this concise filmography into distinct eras. There appears to be a large distinction between Tarr's early and later work, although Tarr insists that everything present in his work has been there since the beginning. Tarr's early work comprises his first 3 films: Family Nest, The Outsider, and The Prefab People, familial dramas based around the inner conflicts and everyday stresses that the average person must endure, the disintegration of family units told in very close proximity environments.
Nem érdekel apuka, hogy maga mit mond, mit nem, én leültem ide, hogy kérjek kölcsön pénzt, hogy el tudjunk menni. Ha nem hisz nekem, nagyon sajnálom.
Én bőrömön pedig nem fogsz elmenni innen lakni. Az én pénzemet, a te pénzeden menj el lakni. Én fizetek.
De hogy jön maga ahhoz, hogy engem számon kérjen, hogy hol az én fizetésem, hol a keresetem? Hogy hallgassa?
Jogom van hozzá, mert itt van.
The closest comparison one could make with this style of filmmaking is with John Cassavetes. They share many of the workings of cinema verite, documentary-style filmmaking with multiple cameras shooting at once, allowing the free expression of improvisation for the actors. The key notion to analyse here is that Tarr is working within the parameters of a social realist framework. The characters are assimilated to the world that they operate in. There's nothing to suggest that what goes on within these frames is not absolute reality.
Megint oskora kombatlás.
Érdekel. Ez variáció, ugyanez csak zöldbe.
Másnap kérek szépen. Hajnalba indultunk. Motoros járőr, észrevettem. Adjuk meg munkat. Ki volt adva?
And any filmic techniques present here fulfill the expectations of such a framework. The people here are the focus. The camera works to service them. Conversations work in shot-reverse shot format, and any conflict that rises is not immediately high stakes. However, it's the humanist gaze of Tarr that elevates situations out of simplicity. It was Tarr's fourth film, Almanac of Fall, which appears to be the transitional piece for Tarr, not so much in content, but in execution. Tarr would shoot Almanac of Fall in a way that he would not return to again, although elements are certainly evident throughout the remainder of his work. For one, it's the last of 2 colour films that Tarr would ever shoot, and it's the most artificial of Tarr's work. Various hues of light paint the image and collide with one another, and Tarr leaves his documentary style of shooting for a much more formal, yet also experimental manner of shooting, with parts of the story told from unreachable angles. Although on the surface it appears that Almanac of Fall would serve as a very poetic dive into his subject's subconscious, the people within these worlds remained his focus, and they still operate much as they did in his previous works. They remain trapped in environments that drive them against one another. It's social realism in an expressionistic setting. The reason that Almanac of Fall is seen as the pivot point for Bela Tarr is because it was the fusing of both his early work and this film that would become the signature for the remainder of his work. The production designer for Almanac of Fall was Hungarian artist Bela Tarr. The reason that this is relevant is because Bela Tarr was responsible for an artistic edict that he dubbed the pseudo manifesto. In it, Tarr claimed that pseudo was the idea of something to be exposing itself as a false image, or at least a complex object providing a false appearance. In essence, the ability of making something real and unreal at the same time. In this instance, I believe it's a crucial aspect in finding out the crux of Bela Tarr's artistic journey by analysing the elements of his authorship revolving around the notion of Bela Tarr creating pseudo-art.
If you have just imagination and you have no any sensibility for the reality, in this case you are fake. You can do it art. It will be artificial. For me, the biggest danger if somebody telling me you are artist. No.
It's the 5 films from Damnation onward wherein we may be finally able to look at what is thought of as the Bela Tarr style. To bear witness to any scene from these films, it's very easy to see that they are all cut from the same cloth. This apocalyptic, otherworldly realm is an extremity of cinematic form. Long takes that push the very limits of cinema, with sequences sometimes up to 10 minutes long. Characters speak in prophetic prose, like people possessed by the dying spirit of the earth.
De mondhatom magának másképp is akarja. Vagy hozzáérni, megrontani és úgy szerezni meg, vagy hozzáérni, megszerezni és így rontani meg. Ez ment évszázadokon át. Ment és ment. Csak ez ment. Néha suttyomban, néha durván, néha finoman, néha brutálisan. Ment, csak ment.
All shot in high contrast black and white in an environment that exists trapped in time. The style and themes are so pervasive that the methodology from one film to the next is indistinguishable. The crew in these films was the same, to the point that Tarr began to say that they were all co-authors of the film. His wife, Agnes Hranitsky, was credited as the editor as well as co-director. These films all carry the same similarities as one another. Putting the scenes next to one another makes it appear as though they come from a single film. The same actors are playing seemingly the same characters, a narrator in pitch black darkness telling a story unrelated to the goings-on on screen.
Egy október végi nap reggelén, nem sokkal azelőtt, hogy az irgalmatlanul hosszú őszi esők első cseppjei lehullottak a szikes, repedezett földre a telep nyugati oldalán, hogy aztán a bűzlő sártenger egészen az első fagyokig járhatatlanná tegye a dűlőutakat, és megközelíthetetlenné váljon a város is, Futaki arra ébredt, hogy harangszót hall.
The style is so pervasive, one may think that there's repetition. So what does this style represent, and why is it significant for Bela Tarr? Rather than continuing to use the artificiality of a production to create a poetic landscape, Tarr opted to create a pseudo-realist work, films that would delve into the real depths of the human condition. But that reality also included a cosmic plane. The growing fictionality of his work, that is to say the move from absolute realist to pseudo-realist, is reflected in his methodology. The more cosmic his message became, the more the filmmaking reflected that. The emblematic facet of most cinema comes with that initial image, the frames that make up a filmmaker's work. Bela Tarr's imagery is that of decayed environments, ruins, sceneries that have been annihilated, whose presence suggests that they have never encountered a touch of life. And what the camera does is equally as ethereal. Many people place Tarr as an auteur of slow cinema, and one wouldn't be remiss to make this comment. Excluding Satantango's 7-hour length, the shots of Tarr are slow, his long takes are quiet. To look once more at comparisons, one can associate Tarr's long takes with Tarkovsky, the primary reason being that the movement of Tarr's camera is not dictated by the action within the frame. When examining Tarr's long takes, many of them are made of a gradual yet constant movement. It's guided via the passage of time regardless of what appears within the frame. If a character enters, the camera doesn't follow the character. It may frame them for a moment, but continue to move and reframe something else. Tarr's gaze is neither that of a participant nor as a voyeur. We're not ingratiated into these worlds, although we're not completely separate from them either. Instead, Tarr gives us a degree of observation wherein the totality of existence, from the absolute real to the poetic intangible, is visible, often moving through the permeable layer of both in a matter of moments.
Somewhere between the reality and the fiction, or I like to use a lot of real moments and I like to involve a lot of improvisation, one hand, and the other hand, I like very much when everything is very well composed and perfect.
A person may discuss the grit of life, yet from our vantage point, we are moving and watching and listening from somewhere else outside of this world, both worlds becoming intermingled with one another in this unique blend of light and dark. To make a stronger comparison, we can take that same approach and see how it's applied to the environment. If Almanac of Fall is the complete artifice, and Tarr's early works are the absolute real, then where do we place something like this? Worlds like this are absolutely real, although they are also completely unfathomable. To say that the worlds of Tarr are artificial would be to ignore what's in front of your very eyes. Everything here is real, the destroyed buildings, the never-ending horizons. However, to say that they are completely real is to state that this is the natural order of things, a land in which cascading rain never ceases, in which a hurricane that blasts the Earth's surface is just what life is. Tarr's worlds exist between two realities in equal measure, one that's recognisable and true, and the other that's impressionistic and dreamlike. The languid inertia of Tarr's worlds may lead some to believe that there's nothing in his landscapes, though they are in fact filled with meaning. They possess texture, atmosphere, and bring forth a tactility, meaning that although they may in one sense operate as an empty realist setting, they are in reality vistas of incredible expression, physically barren, yet hypnotically brimming. After creating these worlds, they must then be inhabited, so with whom did Tarr choose as his subjects? Well, this is perhaps where the biggest alteration in approach occurred with Tarr. While many view his technique changing from his early work, I believe that the biggest shift came with the treatment of his characters. The characters of Tarr were what made the largest motion away from realistic to become unearthly vessels that tended to shift in and out of this world.
Mindenkit felrobbantunk. Beletesszük a zakójába, vagy a fülébe. Az orrába dobjuk bele a dinamitot. Valahogy csak véget kell vetni ennek, nem?
The movement away from realism within the characters created discordance between the character and the environment. No longer were characters directly representational of a claustrophobic world which we knew existed. Now there was an established schism between the people and the world they're in. Although this landscape is inhospitable to all, so perhaps this is the only conceivable representation of humans that could exist in this world. The dichotomy between characters is that in one moment they're dealing with a very real action, money that has been stolen, that they are unable to traverse the weather. But then come monologues, metaphysical diatribes that suggest that the person speaking is not present in this world.
Felvonyítanak a kutyák, meglapul a nyúl, fut a szarvascsorda, fut, riadtan menekül, és ebbe a félelmetes és felfoghatatlan alkonyatban még a madarak is. A madarak is megzavarodnak, és a fészkükre szállnak riadtan. És akkor néma csend.
Tarr has stated that he doesn't choose actors based on their acting talent or even that they have realistic acting. Much like Bresson, the expressions of people are not directly related to the current events on screen. Much like environments, they serve to express something from beyond. An inert action can coincide with a highly expressive or contradictory glare. People will stare into the distance. Others will not acknowledge the insanity that occurs around them. A cavalcade of people will be swept up into the collective subconscious without question. But when encompassing the entirety of Bela Tarr's work, there exists this notion of a closed circle, as if his filmmaking is complete, as though there's totality within it. When looking at his sequences, his techniques, his locations, much of Tarr's work on a micro and macro scale, in one form or another, ends up back where it began. In Satan Tango, we have a literal circle. Where the film ends is also where it begins. Once we've entered the film, a temporal loop traps us from leaving it. However, this can be attributed to his individual sequences also. Time for Tarr is a manner of utilising blocks of it as it emerges. Each sequence is not measured against others. In essence, every shot in each of his films serves their purpose in totality. Typically, montage is required to create meaning between shots, but for Tarr, everything you need to know about each sequence is within the frame. A shot may go on for 7-8 minutes if it's necessary to create the atmosphere that every shot needs. Meaning will emerge of its own accord, because we have no impact on the cosmic levels of reality occurring here. Things will be as they so choose to be. For us, we are within a closed circle, and there's no way out. Hence why frames feel so claustrophobic. Time is trapped within them, as are many of the other elements. Action is mechanistic and looping. People repeat motions and dialogues over and over again, to the point that it barely becomes human.
És a Stengelvel gyerekek lőporról beszéltek, és baktattam, és baktattam, és baktattam. És a Stengelvel gyerekek lőporról beszéltek. A Stengelvel gyerekek lőporról beszéltek. Stengelvel gyerekek lőporról beszéltek.
And a simple sequence will go on for so long that you begin to feel that something is terribly wrong. This would also explain why sound plays such a key part of Tarr's work. The music constructed by Mihaly Vig is again ceaseless, spiraling compositions on repeat that only add to this inability of escape. The soundscape is discordant, deliveries from both professional and non-actors, sounds that are so exaggerated they only just represent what's on screen. Yet perhaps what's most interesting is the fact that in Tarr's films, the music is made before the images are shot. This means that in order to evoke mood, Tarr must conduct the image to the music. What results are sequences that prioritise the atmosphere over action. There's a framework that must be worked within, yet where that feeling will be found must be discovered on the set. This means if things appear to stretch for long periods of time, or our focus is switched to the inertia of what exists around us, we're allowing for the meaning to reveal itself. Editing isn't brought in to further the narrative, it's a punctuation mark, a full stop, a complete close to that sequence, as though each shot has lived its entire life with nothing left out.
If here is, for example, this small flower, it's really important. If I take my hand to, the light is coming from here. If I take my hand to here, it's became dark. It's always the question, if what I want to show, I have to decide the flower or the water, because I just wanted to show you what I think, what is important.
And yet I cannot help but apply this closed circle narrative to Tarr himself. As I said, Bela Tarr has only made 9 feature films before a legitimate retirement after his final piece, The Turin Horse, a film in which he said, "I want to make one more film about the end of the world," after which he felt that he'd developed his style as far as he could take it and urged newer filmmakers to approach cinema in an even more radical fashion than he. Bela Tarr closed his career with a film whose final shot was a light extinguishing into complete darkness. Along with it, all hope for any good to emerge within the world. However, Tarr often insists that his work is aimed at focusing on the humanity, and that his aim is to make people stronger. Perhaps the finale of his career could loop round to the beginning, As the opening text from Family Nest states, this is a true story. It didn't happen to the people in the film, but it could have. Tarr's work has been building towards the inevitable end of the world, the end of everything, but I believe that his artistic journey mirrors that. The reason I've mentioned comparisons to Cassavetes, Tarkovsky and Bresson is because we're speaking of Tarr as an auteur within cinema, but a rising auteur in the era of Tarr could never be wholly original due to the globalization of the art world. Modern auteurship is a combination of pre-existing patterns for various effects. No longer are there any national styles, rarely are there even any waves of cinema, and so Tarr's auteurship came with altering the pre-existing notions of cinema for an original combination. But just as one era of cinematic originality came to an end, with the end of Tarr's career came another. His philosophy is so embedded within his work that his entire process as a filmmaker again is confined within a closed circle. There is no excess, there's nothing more to be said. What Tarr's final film represents is the death of a kind of cinema, the end of a thought process, and one more step added to our journey towards entropy. Tarr's work exists trapped in time, and it's something that we can never return to. His nihilistic worlds where all comfort is eschewed is a reminder that these frightening landscapes are still our home, an amalgamation of a nightmarish hellscape whose existence is inescapable. But although the end of the world is nigh, for now there still remains light, one that may extinguish, but such is reality. To deny it is to lie about our very means of existence, though perhaps Tarr's vision of our existence is the perfect representation of how our world ultimately operates, for when on the precipice of the end of the world, it's the cosmic whispers of death that will appear all the more rational.
Ragyogó kilátásaink vannak a jövőre.
Majd kiderül, mit akar ezzel az egész Elirimiás. Holnapra kiderül.
We'd like to thank Mubi for sponsoring this video. Mubi is a curated streaming service dedicated to elevating great cinema from around the globe. From iconic directors to emerging auteurs, there's always something new to discover. And with Mubi, each and every film is hand-selected, so you can create your own brand of a cinema viewing experience, available to stream anytime, anywhere. Right now on Mubi, you can watch Petite Maman by Celine Sciamma. Part ghost story and part coming-of-age tale, Sciamma's sentimental vision of coping with loss via the emotional connection of multiple generations cements its status as a truly modern great. You can try Mubi free for 30 days at mubi.com/cinemacartography. That's mubi.com/cinemacartography for a whole month of great cinema for free.